Two children step onto a train that will carry them through loss, secrets, and unexpected love. This is not just a story of war. This is a story of courage, of family, of finding home. Stay with them, because what waits at the end will break your heart and heal it too. The town of Greyhaven had always been quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet people dream about, with birds singing and children laughing in the distance. No. Greyhaven's quiet was heavier than that. It was the kind of silence that felt like it was hiding something. The kind that made strangers lower their voices when they passed through. At the center of the town lay Blackwater Lake. It wasn't large, but it was deep. Deeper than anyone could measure, or so the old stories claimed. The lake was surrounded by tall pine trees whose shadows stretched across the water even in the middle of the day. At night, the surface looked like polished glass, still, dark, and endless. People in Greyhaven didn't swim there. They didn't fish there either. Most of them pretended the lake simply didn't exist. But on the night everything changed, the lake refused to be ignored. It was just past midnight when the storm rolled in. Wind tore through the trees like it was searching for something. Rain lashed against windows and rooftops, and thunder rattled the old houses along Maple Street. Most of the town slept through it, wrapped in blankets, unaware that before morning came, Greyhaven would lose one of its own. A single figure stood at the edge of Blackwater Lake. She was small against the vast darkness, her coat whipping in the wind. Strands of wet hair clung to her face as she stared out across the water. Lena Hart didn't look like someone about to disappear. She looked like someone thinking. Anyone watching her might have noticed the way she held herself, not frightened, not frantic, but tired. Deeply, painfully tired. Like someone who had carried a secret for too long. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the lake for a split second. In that brief flash, Lena's reflection appeared on the water's surface, pale, still, almost ghost-like. Then the darkness swallowed it again. She stepped forward. In that brief flash, Lena's reflection appeared on the water's surface, pale, still, almost ghost-like. Then the darkness swallowed it again. She stepped forward. The mud at the shoreline sucked at her boots. Cold water seeped through the leather as she moved deeper, but she didn't stop. The rain softened her outline until she looked like she was dissolving into the storm itself. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "We found her things near the shore," the sheriff said gently. "Search teams are out now." Mara closed her eyes. Lena hated the lake. Everyone in Greyhaven knew that. As children, they had avoided it together, daring each other to step closer but never quite doing it. Lena used to say the water looked like it was watching them. Lena would never go there alone. "Sheriff," Mara said slowly, "my sister didn't fall." The line went quiet. "She wouldn't," Mara added. "Something's wrong." That night, Mara packed a bag. She told herself it was only for a few days. Just enough time to sort things out, attend whatever quiet, awkward funeral Greyhaven would hold, and leave again before the town could pull her back into its web of memories. But as she boarded the bus the next morning, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just going home. She was going back to something unfinished. Something waiting. Greyhaven looked exactly the same when she arrived. The same crooked sign at the town entrance. The same rows of aging houses. The same lake, visible in the distance like a dark stain at the edge of the forest. Mara stepped off the bus and inhaled sharply. The air smelled of pine trees and damp soil, the scent of her childhood, the scent she had spent years trying to forget. Sheriff Nolan met her at the station. He looked older than she remembered, his hair thinner, his expression weighed down by the kind of fatigue that comes from seeing too many things you can't explain. "I'm sorry, Mara," he said quietly. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Search teams are still working," he added. "But you know how the lake is." Yes. She did. Too deep. Too dark. too good at keeping what it took. As they drove through town, Mara noticed something strange. People were watching her. Not openly, Greyhaven residents were too polite for that, but from behind curtains, from shop windows, from doorways. Their eyes followed the sheriff's car as it passed. Not with sympathy. With unease. "Why are they staring?" Mara asked. Sheriff Nolan hesitated. "Your sister," he said slowly, "was asking questions before she died." "What kind of questions?" "About the lake." Mara's heart skipped. "She'd been talking to people," he continued. "Digging into old records. Old deaths." The car rolled to a stop at a red light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mara asked the question she hadn't meant to say aloud. Did someone want her to stop? The sheriff didn't answer. He didn't need to. That evening, Mara stood at the edge of Blackwater Lake. The water looked calm now, almost peaceful, reflecting the pale colors of the sunset. If she didn't know better, she might have believed it was harmless. But she did know better. The lake didn't just take people. It waited for them. And as Mara stared into its dark surface, she felt a cold certainty settle into her bones. Lena hadn't simply disappeared. Someone in Greyhaven knew what happened that night. And Mara wasn't leaving until she found out who. A ripple spread across the water. For a moment, Mara thought it was just the wind. But then she saw something else. Near the old wooden pier, half hidden beneath the surface, something pale drifted slowly into view. Not a reflection. Not a trick of the light. Something real. Mara took a step closer, her pulse hammering in her ears. The lake, it seemed, wasn't finished telling its story. And it had just begun with hers. Mara barely slept that night. Greyhaven had a way of crawling back into her bones, filling the spaces she thought she had emptied years ago. Every sound felt familiar, the distant bark of a dog, the groan of old wood settling, the wind slipping through the trees like a whispered warning. She lay awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling she once knew by heart. Nothing had changed. The same pale yellow wallpaper. The same crack running above the window. Even the faint smell of lavender from her mother's old drawer sachets still lingered in the air. It was like stepping into a photograph frozen in time. Except Lena was gone. And the silence she left behind felt louder than anything Mara had ever heard. By morning, Mara couldn't stand being in the house any longer. She dressed quickly, pulled her coat tight against the cold, and stepped outside. Greyhaven looked peaceful in daylight. Too peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the trees, painting golden streaks across the quiet streets. A delivery truck rolled slowly past the bakery, and somewhere a church bell rang softly. It looked like the kind of town where nothing bad ever happened. Mara knew better. She headed straight for the sheriff's office. Sheriff Nolan looked surprised to see her so early, but he waved her inside and handed her a cup of coffee without asking. "You always did hate waiting," he said. Mara gave a faint smile. "And you always knew when to bring coffee." They sat across from each other in the small office, the hum of an old ceiling fan filling the space between them. "I want to know everything," Mara said. "Not the polite version. The real one." The sheriff nodded slowly. "We don't have much yet," he admitted. "Search teams dragged part of the lake this morning. No sign of her." Mara's fingers tightened around the cup. "But we did find something else," he added. He reached into a folder and slid a plastic evidence bag across the desk. Inside it was a small, leather-bound notebook. Mara recognized it instantly. "Lena's journal," she whispered. "She carried it everywhere," Nolan said. "We found it in her car." Mara picked up the bag carefully, as if the notebook might shatter. "Can I read it?" The sheriff hesitated. "Technically it's part of an ongoing investigation." Mara met his eyes. Please. He sighed and pushed the bag toward her. Don't remove it from the plastic, he warned. And if you find anything important, you tell me. Mara nodded. She opened the notebook slowly. Lena's handwriting filled the pages, neat, deliberate, unmistakably hers. The first few entries were ordinary enough. Notes about town records. Old newspaper clippings. Lists of names. But as Mara flipped further, the tone changed. The writing became sharper. More urgent. One entry caught her eye. They say the lake chooses them. But that's a lie. Someone always knows why they end up there. Mara's breath caught. She turned the page. 3 deaths in 12 years. All ruled accidents. All women. All connected in ways the town refuses to see. Her heart pounded harder. Another page. I think I understand now. And if I'm right, someone will try to stop me. Mara closed the notebook abruptly. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She knew something, Mara said quietly. Sheriff Nolan rubbed his temple. She talked to me last week, he admitted. Said she thought the lake deaths weren't random. I told her to leave it alone. Why? Because this town survives on things staying buried, he said. And digging them up never ends well. Mara stared at the journal in her hands. Well, it ended worse for her. The sheriff didn't argue. After leaving the office, Mara walked without thinking, her feet carrying her down the familiar streets until she found herself standing outside the town library. Lena used to spend hours here as a kid. So had Mara. The building hadn't changed much, still brick, still quiet, still smelling faintly of dust and paper. Inside, the librarian looked up and froze. Mara Hart, she said softly. Hi, Mrs. Dunley. The older woman came around the desk and gave her a gentle hug. I'm so sorry about Lena, she murmured. Thank you. Mrs. Dunley studied her face for a moment. You look just like your mother when you frown, she said. Mara managed a small smile. I need to see the town archives, she said. Old newspapers. Records. Anything about lake incidents. The librarian hesitated only briefly before nodding. Follow me. She led Mara down a narrow staircase into the basement archive room. Dust motes drifted through thin shafts of light. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes of old documents, yellowed newspapers, and town records stretching back decades. Take your time, Mrs. Dunley said. Call me if you need help. Mara nodded and got to work. Hours passed as she sifted through brittle newspaper pages. Most articles were small. Easy to miss. Local woman found dead near shore. Teenage girl missing after night walk. Authorities rule drowning accidental. Different years. Different names. Same lake. But one article made her pause. It was older than the others, nearly 15 years old. The headline read, Teacher dies in late night fall by pier. Mara leaned closer. The accompanying photograph showed a smiling woman standing outside the town school. Behind her, half hidden in the background, stood a young Lena. Mara's pulse spiked. She scanned the article quickly. The woman's name was Clara Whitmore. Elementary school teacher. Beloved by students. Death ruled accidental. But what made Mara's hands shake was the final line of the article. Whitmore had reportedly been researching local folklore and the history of Blackwater Lake before her death. Mara leaned back slowly. Lena hadn't been the first. She wasn't even the second. Someone in Greyhaven had been asking questions about the lake for years. And every time they did, they ended up in the water. Mara gathered copies of the articles and stuffed them into her bag. By the time she stepped back outside, the sky had turned gray again. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, thick and heavy. The air smelled like rain. Without quite deciding to, Mara found herself walking toward the lake. The trail was muddy from the previous night's storm, and the trees seemed to lean closer as she passed, their branches whispering overhead. When she reached the shoreline, the lake looked darker than it had the evening before. Restless. Alive. She walked to the old wooden pier. It creaked under her weight as she stepped onto it. The water below was opaque, impossible to see through. Mara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "Why were you here, Lena?" she murmured. The wind picked up slightly, sending small ripples across the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Mara noticed something wedged between the planks near the end of the pier. She crouched down and pulled it free. It was a photograph. Waterlogged, edges curled, but still visible. She wiped it gently with her sleeve. The image showed 3 women standing near the lake. One was clearly Lena. Another was the teacher from the article, Clara Whitmore. The third woman stood slightly behind them, her face partially turned away from the camera. But Mara recognized her instantly. It was Mrs. Dalton. The same woman who had whispered at the grocery store that morning. Mara's stomach twisted. Why had Lena been meeting with her? And why had no one mentioned it? A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Mara stood slowly, the photograph trembling in her hand. For the first time since returning, fear crept in. Not fear of the lake. Fear of the town. Because Greyhaven wasn't just hiding secrets. It was protecting them. And now Mara understood. Something bigger. Something that had started long before her. And if Mara kept digging, she might be next. Mara didn't go back home after leaving the lake. Instead, she drove slowly through Greyhaven, the photograph lying on the passenger seat beside her like something alive. Every time she glanced at it, the same thought pressed harder into her mind. Lena hadn't just been researching the lake. She'd been meeting people. People who were still here. People who might know why she died. The town suddenly felt smaller than it had that morning, its streets narrower, its buildings leaning closer as if listening. Mara stopped outside the small grocery store near the town square. The bell above the door chimed softly when she stepped inside. The smell of coffee and detergent filled the air, familiar and strangely comforting. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Dalton. She looked up, and for a brief second, surprise flickered across her face before it settled into something more careful. "Mara," she said gently. "I heard you were back. I'm so sorry about your sister." Mara nodded once. "Thank you." She walked closer to the counter, her fingers tightening around the photograph in her coat pocket. "I found this near the pier," she said, placing it on the counter between them. Mrs. Dalton's smile faded. Her eyes moved slowly from the photograph to Mara's face. "I remember that day," she said after a moment. "We were helping Lena with some research." "What kind of research?" The older woman hesitated. "Local history," she said. "Old stories. That sort of thing." Mara didn't look away. She thought the lake deaths were connected. Mrs. Dalton's lips pressed into a thin line. "People in town don't like those conversations," she said quietly. "That didn't stop Lena." "No," the woman admitted. "It didn't." A long silence stretched between them. Then Mara leaned forward slightly. What was she getting close to? Mrs. Dalton's gaze drifted toward the store windows, as if checking whether anyone might be watching. She believed the lake wasn't the cause, she whispered. She thought it was the cover. For what? For people. The word hung in the air like a dropped glass. Mara felt her heartbeat in her throat. People doing what? Mrs. Dalton shook her head slowly. "I shouldn't say more," she murmured. I already said too much to Lena. And now she's dead, Mara said. The woman flinched. That's not fair, she said softly. No, Mara replied. It isn't. She took the photograph back and slipped it into her pocket. If you remember anything else, she added, anything at all, you tell me. Mrs. Dalton nodded, but her eyes looked distant, filled with something like fear. When Mara stepped outside, the sky had darkened again. Rain threatened in the distance, clouds rolling in thick and low. She pulled her coat tighter and started walking toward the car when she heard a voice behind her. You shouldn't be asking about the lake. Mara turned. A teenage girl stood near the edge of the sidewalk, half hidden beneath the awning of the closed bookstore. She looked about 16, maybe 17, with dark hair pulled into a messy braid and eyes that watched the world like it might bite. Do I know you? Mara asked. The girl shook her head. My name's Iris, she said. I used to babysit for your sister sometimes. Mara frowned. I don't remember. She didn't tell people about me, Iris interrupted. She said it was safer that way. A chill slipped down Mara's spine. Safer from what? Iris stepped closer, lowering her voice. I saw her the night she died. Mara's breath caught. Where? Near the pier, Iris said. She wasn't alone. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Who was with her? The girl hesitated, her gaze darting toward the street. I don't know their name, she admitted. But I've seen them around town. Older. Tall. Wears a long coat. Mara's mind raced. Did you hear what they were saying? Not everything, Iris said. But I heard your sister say she wasn't scared anymore. She said she had proof. Mara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Proof of what? Iris shook her head. I don't know. But whoever she was talking to, they didn't look happy about it. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Why didn't you tell the police? Mara asked. The girl gave a bitter little laugh. Because this is Grey Haven, she said. People don't tell the police things here. Not about the lake. She stepped back toward the shadows of the awning. Just, be careful, she added. Your sister thought the truth would protect her. And it didn't, Mara said quietly. Iris met her eyes. No, she said. It didn't. Then she turned and disappeared down the side street before Mara could say another word. Mara stood there for a long moment, the wind tugging at her coat. Lena had proof. Someone had confronted her. And now there was a witness. A young girl who had seen more than she should have. Mara exhaled slowly, trying to steady the storm rising inside her. This wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about what Lena had uncovered before she died. And if proof existed once, it might still exist somewhere. Mara got into her car and pulled the journal from her bag, flipping through the pages again with new urgency. Halfway through, something slipped loose from the spine and fell into her lap. A folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. It was a map of the lake. But not an ordinary one. Certain spots along the shoreline were marked in red ink, each with a small date written beside it. Every date matched one of the drowning cases. And at the bottom of the page, Lena had written 3 words. Not random places. Mara stared at the map, her pulse quickening. The deaths hadn't just happened near the lake. They'd happened in specific locations. Chosen locations. Which meant someone had been using the lake. Not as a mystery. But as a tool. Mara looked up toward the dark line of trees where the lake lay hidden beyond the road. For the first time, she felt certain of one thing. Lena hadn't been chasing a ghost story. She had been uncovering a pattern. And patterns always led back to people. Mara folded the map slowly. The storm finally broke overhead, rain tapping against the windshield in steady rhythm. She didn't start the engine right away. Instead, she whispered the words she knew Lena would have wanted her to say. "I'm not stopping." Because now she understood something her sister must have realized too late. The lake didn't take people. People used the lake. And Mara intended to find out who. Rain followed Mara all the way home. By the time she reached the house, the sky had opened completely, turning the quiet streets of Greyhaven into slick ribbons of black asphalt and shimmering reflections. The sound of rain on the roof felt louder inside the old house, echoing through the hallway like a ticking clock. Mara locked the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, breathing slowly. Everything was moving faster now. The journal. The photograph. The girl who had seen Lena that night. And now the map. She spread the paper across the kitchen table and smoothed its creases with her palm. Red ink circled different sections of the lake, each marked with a date. She had already matched some of them with the old newspaper clippings. They lined up perfectly. Not random places. Not accidents. Patterns. Which meant someone had planned them. A cold weight settled in her stomach. She reached for Lena's journal again, flipping through until she found a page she had skimmed earlier but not really read. This time, she read every word. People think water hides things. But water only keeps what it's given. The truth is always placed there first. Mara swallowed. Below the line, Lena had scribbled another note. "Talk to Tom before it's too late." Mara frowned. Tom. The name felt familiar, but she couldn't immediately place it. She stood still for a moment, searching her memory, until suddenly it clicked. Tom Weaver. He used to run the boat rental shack near the lake. When they were kids, he'd been the one adult who didn't treat the lake like it was cursed. He'd tell them stories about fish the size of dogs and hidden underwater caves, always laughing when the other townspeople told him to stop filling children's heads with nonsense. If anyone knew the lake better than the sheriff, it was Tom. And if Lena had wanted to speak to him, there had to be a reason. Mara grabbed her coat again and headed back out into the rain. The boat shack sat at the far end of the lakeside road, half hidden behind a stand of old cedar trees. It looked smaller than Mara remembered, its paint peeling, the sign above the door faded nearly white. A dim light glowed inside. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. After a few seconds, the door creaked open just enough for a face to appear. Tom Weaver looked older, of course. His hair had gone mostly gray, and deep lines carved across his forehead. But his eyes were the same, sharp, watchful, and far more serious than she remembered. "Mara Hart," he said quietly. "Didn't expect to see you back here." "I need to talk to you," she said. He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in before you drown out there." The shack smelled of damp wood and motor oil. Old life jackets hung from hooks along the wall, and a small heater hummed in the corner. Tom shut the door and leaned against it. "This about your sister?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. "She came to see me a few weeks ago," he admitted. "Asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that make people in this town uncomfortable," he said. Mara pulled the map from her pocket and spread it on the small workbench between them. "She marked these spots," she said. "Every drowning." Tom's expression darkened as he looked down. "Yeah," he murmured. "That's not wrong." Mara's breath hitched. "So they are connected." He rubbed a hand over his beard. "The lake's deep," he said slowly. "But it's not magic. Currents move certain ways. Drop something in one place, it won't drift far. He tapped one of the red circles. These spots? They're all near the same underwater ridge. Steep drop-off. Hard to search. Easy to lose things. Mara felt her pulse quicken. So if someone wanted to stage a drowning. Tom nodded grimly. That's where they'd do it. The rain battered the roof harder, as if emphasizing the words. Mara swallowed. Did Lena think someone was using the lake to cover murders? Tom didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to a small cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a metal box. He set it on the table between them. She asked me to hold on to this, he said quietly. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to you. Mara's heart lurched. He pushed the box toward her. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were several items. A USB drive. A folded letter. And a small voice recorder. Mara picked up the letter first. Her sister's handwriting covered the page. If you're reading this, it means I was right to be scared. The lake isn't the danger. The people are. I think I finally know who's been behind it, but I need proof that no one can erase. If I don't make it back, don't trust the town. Trust what's recorded. Mara's throat tightened. She picked up the voice recorder next. Have you listened to this? She asked. Tom shook his head. Didn't feel right, he said. It wasn't meant for me. Mara hesitated only a second before pressing play. Static crackled. Then Lena's voice filled the small shack. Soft at first. Tired. But steady. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. I met with them tonight. They think I'm bluffing. They think I don't have enough evidence. But they don't know about the files. They don't know I told Mara everything. Mara froze. I hope I get to tell her myself, Lena's voice continued. But if I don't? Mara, if you're hearing this, you have to finish it. The truth's been buried in this town for years. Don't let them bury you too. The recording ended with a click. Silence filled the shack except for the pounding rain outside. Mara stared at the recorder, her chest tight. She knew, she whispered. Tom nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. She knew. Mara closed the box carefully. Who was she talking about? She asked. Tom's jaw tightened. I don't know for sure, he said. But there's only a handful of people in Greyhaven with enough influence to keep things quiet this long. Mara's mind flashed to faces she'd seen since returning. The sheriff. The council members. The shop owners. The people who smiled politely but watched too closely. This town's been protecting someone, she said. Tom didn't disagree. Mara looked toward the dark outline of the lake beyond the shack window. For years, the water had taken the blame. But now she knew better. The lake hadn't been hiding the truth. It had been holding it. And now that truth was starting to surface. Mara tightened her grip on the metal box. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. Tom met her eyes. Then you better be ready, he replied. Because once the town realizes what you have. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mara already understood. The lake wasn't the only thing in Greyhaven that could swallow people whole. And she had just stepped directly into its depths. Mara didn't open the metal box again until she was back inside the house. The storm had settled into a steady rain, the kind that seemed determined to last all night. Water slid down the windows in slow trails, distorting the view of the empty street outside. She locked the door, checked it twice, then carried the box into the living room and set it on the coffee table. For a long moment, she just stared at it. It felt heavier now. Not because of the objects inside, but because of what they meant. Lena had known she might not make it back. She had prepared for it. Mara sank onto the couch and reached for the letter again, reading it slowly, as if the words might change the second time. They didn't. But something else did. At the very bottom of the page, in much smaller handwriting, Lena had added one final line. Check the attic. I couldn't risk keeping it with me. Mara's heart skipped. The attic. She hadn't been up there in years. As kids, she and Lena had treated it like a forbidden world, a place filled with old furniture, boxes of forgotten clothes, and dust thick enough to write their names in. After their parents died, neither of them had touched it again, until now. Mara grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and moved toward the hallway. The narrow staircase leading to the attic creaked under her weight as she climbed, each step echoing in the quiet house. At the top, she hesitated. The attic door stood slightly ajar, as if someone had opened it recently. A faint chill slid down her spine. She pushed the door open slowly. The smell of old wood and dust filled her lungs instantly. Moonlight seeped through the small round window at the far end, casting pale light across the cluttered space. Nothing looked disturbed at first glance. Boxes stacked along the walls. A broken chair in the corner. Their father's old trunk still sitting where it had always been. But then Mara noticed something new. Near the center of the attic floor, one of the boards looked slightly raised. She stepped closer, crouching down. The board wasn't nailed as tightly as the others. She wedged her fingers into the narrow gap and pulled. It lifted with a soft groan. Beneath it lay a flat, waterproof envelope. Mara's pulse hammered as she pulled it free. Lena had hidden something here. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside were several printed photographs, a stack of documents, and another USB drive. The first photograph made her breath catch. It showed the town council gathered outside the community hall. Sheriff Nolan stood among them. So did Mrs. Dalton. And near the edge of the photo, slightly apart from the others, stood a tall man in a dark coat. Mara's stomach twisted. She had seen that coat before. Iris's voice echoed in her mind. Older. Tall. Wears a long coat. Her hands shook as she flipped to the next photograph. This one was taken near the lake. Nighttime. Grainy, like it had been zoomed in from far away. Two figures stood on the pier. One was Lena. The other was the same tall man. Even blurred, his posture looked tense, confrontational. Mara swallowed hard. Lena had been meeting him. And someone had been watching. She set the photos aside and picked up the documents. Most of them were copies of old police reports, the same drowning cases she'd already seen in the newspapers. But these versions weren't the ones the public had read. Sections were highlighted. Notes scribbled in the margins. Times didn't match witness statements. Medical reports mentioned injuries inconsistent with accidental falls. And in several places, Lena had written the same word again and again. Pressure. Mara frowned. Pressure from who? She flipped to the last document in the stack. It was a typed list of names. Some she recognized instantly. Town council members. Business owners. Even a former mayor. Next to each name was a date. And beside several dates was a small checkmark in Lena's handwriting. Mara's mouth went dry. This wasn't just about one person. It was about a network. A group of people who had been protecting each other for years. People with enough influence to steer investigations, silence rumors, and make deaths look like accidents. The attic suddenly felt too small. Too close. Mara forced herself to breathe slowly. Lena hadn't just been chasing a theory. She had been mapping something real. Something dangerous. Mara gathered the evidence back into the envelope, her mind racing. If Lena had been right, then the lake wasn't just a hiding place for bodies. It was the final step in a system. A way to erase problems quietly. And if that system still existed, then the people involved wouldn't let Mara expose it easily. A floorboard creaked downstairs. Mara froze. She hadn't heard the front door open. Had she? The house fell completely silent. Rain tapped steadily against the roof, but beneath it, she thought she heard something else. A faint thud. Then another. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Someone was inside. Mara grabbed the envelope, switched off the flashlight, and moved silently toward the attic door. She eased it open just enough to see the dark hallway below. At first, she saw nothing. Then a shadow moved across the living room wall. Slow. Deliberate. Her breath caught in her throat. Whoever it was hadn't bothered turning on the lights. They were moving through the house like they knew exactly where they were going. Mara's grip tightened on the envelope. They were searching for something. Searching for Lena's evidence. Which meant they were already scared. And scared people made mistakes. Mara stepped back into the attic shadows, her mind racing. She couldn't confront them. Not yet. Not without knowing who they were. The floor creaked again below, closer to the stairs this time. They were coming up. Mara's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give her away. She scanned the attic quickly, looking for somewhere to hide. Her gaze landed on their father's old trunk. Without hesitating, she lifted the lid and slipped inside, pulling it shut just as the attic stairs groaned under someone's weight. Darkness swallowed her completely. She held her breath. Footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Paused. Then moved slowly into the attic. Wood creaked under careful steps. Boxes shifted. Paper rustled. The stranger was searching. And they were getting closer. Mara pressed the envelope tightly against her chest, willing herself to stay silent. If they found her now, everything Lena had died for might vanish with her. The footsteps stopped just a few feet away. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice spoke quietly into the dark. "I know you're here, Mara." Her blood turned to ice. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was one she recognized. One she had trusted. One she had never expected to hear inside this house. Sheriff Nolan. The trunk lid creaked slightly as Mara's fingers tightened. And in that instant, she understood something terrifying. The truth Lena had uncovered wasn't just buried in Greyhaven. It was standing in her attic. And it had come looking for her. The rain began before dawn. Not the gentle kind that whispers against the window, but the heavy, relentless kind that sounds like the sky is trying to erase the earth beneath it. Mara woke to it, her eyes opening slowly as if her body already knew something was wrong. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the cold room returned. The narrow bed. The thin blanket. The faint smell of damp wood and coal smoke. The war. She sat up quietly so she wouldn't wake Leo, but when she looked to the other bed, she froze. It was empty. Her breath caught. "Leo," she whispered. No answer. She swung her legs down, the floor icy beneath her feet. Her heartbeat grew louder with every step toward the door. "Leo," she called again, louder now. Still nothing. Panic rose sharp and fast in her chest. She rushed into the hallway, her eyes scanning the dim corridor, the weak morning light barely reaching through the small windows. The house was silent except for the rain hammering the roof. "Mara?" Mrs. Alden's voice came from the kitchen. "Is something wrong?" "Leo's gone." The words felt like glass in her throat. Mrs. Alden stood immediately, her face tightening. Gone. He's not in the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mr. Alden grabbed his coat. He couldn't have gone far in this weather. But Mara already knew. Leo didn't wander. If he left, it was for a reason. They searched the house first. Closet. Pantry. Back room. Cellar. Nothing. The rain only grew louder. Mara stepped outside despite Mrs. Alden's protest. The cold slapped her instantly, soaking through her thin dress within seconds. The yard was muddy, the ground churned into dark, sticky clay. Her eyes scanned desperately. Then she saw the footprints. Small. Barely visible in the rain. Leading toward the road. Her chest tightened so hard she thought she might collapse. He went out, she whispered. Mr. Alden followed the prints, his boots sinking into the mud. Toward town. Why would he go to town? Mrs. Alden asked softly. But Mara knew. Because of the train. Because of their father. Because hope is stronger than fear when you're 10 years old. I'm coming, Mara said, already moving. They walked fast, the rain soaking them completely, the road turning into a slick ribbon of mud beneath their feet. Mara's lungs burned, but she didn't slow down. Every terrible thought crowded her mind. What if he slipped? What if someone took him? What if? Mara. Mr. Alden pointed ahead. There, beneath the old railway bridge, was a small figure. Curled in on itself. Mara ran. Leo. He looked up slowly, his hair plastered to his forehead, his small hands clutching something to his chest. Mara. She dropped to her knees beside him, pulling him into her arms, relief flooding through her so violently it hurt. What were you thinking? She cried, her voice shaking. You could have been hurt. I had to come, he whispered. Why? He held out what he'd been clutching. A letter. The paper was damp but carefully protected inside a folded cloth. Mara frowned. Where did you get this? It was at the station, Leo said. In the broken mailbox. It had our name on it. Her fingers trembled as she took it. The handwriting was messy but familiar. Too familiar. Her stomach dropped. It was their father's. Impossible. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single page, and only a few lines. My dear Mara and Leo. If you are reading this, it means I couldn't come back when I promised. But I am alive. They moved us east. Farther than I expected. Do not stop believing I will find you. Stay together. You are the reason I am still breathing. Mara's vision blurred. The words felt unreal. Alive that he was alive. Her breath broke into a sob she couldn't stop. Leo watched her carefully. Is it good news? She nodded, unable to speak. He let out a tiny, relieved laugh, as if he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I knew it, he whispered. I knew he wasn't gone. Mara pulled him into another hug, pressing her face into his wet hair. For the first time since the war began, hope didn't feel like a lie. Behind them, Mrs. Alden covered her mouth, her eyes shining. Mr. Alden spoke softly. We should get you both home before you freeze. But Mara didn't move yet. She stared at the letter again. East. That meant distance. That meant time. That meant uncertainty. But it also meant something else. A chance. And chances were rare in a world like this. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it inside her dress. We're not giving up, she whispered to Leo. He nodded fiercely. Never. They walked back slowly through the rain, but something had changed. The world was still broken. The sky still heavy. The war still endless. But now there was a thread connecting them to the future. A fragile one. A dangerous one. But real. That night, Mara lay awake listening to the rain fade into silence. Her fingers rested over the letter beneath her pillow. For weeks, she had felt like they were drifting in darkness. Now, for the first time, she felt like they were moving towards something. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. But she knew this. Their story wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about finding their way back to each other. And that was a journey worth everything. The letter changed everything. Not loudly. Not all at once. But in the quiet ways that matter most. Mara felt it the next morning when she woke before sunrise, her hand already reaching beneath her pillow to make sure the letter was still there. The paper was slightly wrinkled now, softer from being folded and unfolded so many times, but the words still felt as sharp as the moment she first read them. He is alive. Those 3 words had planted something dangerous inside her. Hope. And hope demanded action. She dressed quietly and slipped out of the room. The house was still asleep, the air cold and pale with early light. She found Mrs. Alden in the kitchen, already tending the small stove. "You're up early," Mrs. Alden said gently. "I need to go to town today," Mara replied. Mrs. Alden studied her face for a long moment. "Because of the letter?" Mara nodded. "I want to ask at the station. Someone must know where the trains go east. Maybe someone saw him. Maybe someone delivered the letter." Mrs. Alden sighed softly, not in annoyance, but in worry. "Mara, the world outside isn't safe for children chasing questions." "I'm not chasing questions," Mara said quietly. "I'm following the only lead we have." Mrs. Alden reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then you won't go alone." By mid-morning, Mara and Leo were walking the muddy road into town with Mr. Alden beside them. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy, the air smelling of wet iron and smoke. The town felt different now. Before, it had seemed like a place they were sent to wait. Now it felt like a place holding answers. The station came into view slowly, a squat building of dark brick, its roof patched in places, its sign crooked from years of wind. A single train track cut through it like a scar. Mara's heart began to pound. They stepped onto the platform. It was nearly empty. Just a woman with 2 crates, a soldier smoking near the far end, and an old porter sweeping rainwater off the concrete. Mara approached the porter first. "Excuse me," she said. "Sir." He glanced up, his face lined with age and tiredness. "Morning, miss. My father, he was moved east with a group months ago. We received a letter yesterday. Do you know where trains from here go?" The porter leaned on his broom, thinking. East covers a lot of ground these days. "Please," Mara whispered. "Anything helps." Before he could answer, a voice cut in from behind her. "You shouldn't be asking questions like that in public." Mara turned. A tall man stood a few steps away, his coat dark and worn, his hat pulled low. His face was sharp, his eyes watchful, the kind of man who seemed to see more than he said. Mr. Alden stepped slightly in front of the children. "And you are?" "Someone who knows how dangerous curiosity can be," the man replied calmly. Leo gripped Mara's sleeve. Mara swallowed but held her ground. "Do you know about the transports?" The man studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I know enough to tell you this, letters don't arrive by accident anymore." Her breath caught. "So someone delivered it on purpose?" "Yes." "Who?" "That depends on who wants your father found, and who doesn't." A chill ran through Mara. Mr. Alden frowned. "If you have something useful to say it plainly." The man glanced around the platform before stepping closer, lowering his voice. 3 weeks ago, a freight train passed through here. Not listed. Guarded. No passengers allowed near it. But I saw names chalked on the side of one wagon. Mara's pulse roared in her ears. One of them, the man continued, matched the name on the letter you're holding in your pocket. Mara's hand flew instinctively to her dress. How do you? Because I was the one who wiped the names off before the train left. Silence fell between them. Why? She asked. The man's eyes softened, just slightly. Because sometimes the only way to help people survive is to pretend you never saw them. Leo whispered, does that mean our father was on that train? The man nodded once. Yes. Mara felt the world tilt. Alive. Moving. Somewhere east. So where did it go? She asked. That's the problem, the man said. Those trains don't follow normal routes. They change tracks to avoid notice. Even the station masters don't always know. Hope flickered, fragile but burning. There must be something, Mara insisted. A direction. A last stop. Anything. The man hesitated. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded scrap of paper. I shouldn't give you this, he murmured. He handed it to her. It was a rough sketch of rail lines branching east from their town, with one route circled in pencil. This track was used that night, he said. It leads to an industrial region. Camps. Factories. Storage depots. Mara's fingers tightened around the paper. It's not a map to your father, the man warned. It's only a direction. It's enough, she whispered. The man straightened. Listen to me, child. If you follow that path, you won't just be searching for him. What do you mean? You'll be stepping into a part of the war that doesn't let people walk out easily. Mara met his gaze steadily. We already live in the war, she said. At least now we know where to walk. For the first time, the man gave a faint, sad smile. You're braver than you should have to be. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, he added without looking back. If anyone asks where you got that map, you found it yourself. Then he disappeared down the platform, blending into the gray morning as if he had never been there at all. Leo exhaled slowly. Mara, does this mean we can really find him? She looked at the map again. At the single penciled circle. At the thin line stretching into the unknown. Yes, she said softly. For the first time, we actually can.